Thank you very much. My name is Ben Stock. I'll introduce you to David Yaeger here in a second. A real quick introduction on our technical sponsorship. This is a technical discussion. This is not a sales pitch outside of this first 30 seconds and maybe the last 30 seconds. Ordr is an automated device discovery, identification, and protection tool that uses machine learning and AI technology to passively identify devices on your network, provide additional information to other tools that you have to help better protect them, and just in general, make your network a little more secure. Today, we're going to be talking with Dave Yaeger about his journey through this process. Dave's journey is one of many different journeys you can take through this process. After Dave gets done talking about his journey, we will talk about other options that are out there and many different paths you can take to get to the same goal, depending on your resources and what you have available to you. Dave, I'll turn it over to you if you can do a quick introduction about what you do for ProHealth and your journey. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. And I apologize to everyone there that I wasn't able to be there in person due to travel restrictions for the corporation. They didn't allow me to travel, but they obviously, technology as it is, allowed us to continue on with this presentation. So I do work for ProHealth. I am the Biomed Security DBA. I've been in that role for probably 3.5 years now. About ProHealth, we are a 3-hospital system. We do service the Waukesha County areas and surrounding areas in Wisconsin. So we have about 360 beds in our 3 hospitals, 13 clinics or so. We also a freestanding emergency department and a cancer center. You guys can read that, partnerships with surgery and endoscopy centers as well. So next. So this is a little bit of the team that we see here. You know, there's in the Biomed engineering department itself, and this is a little bit of an old slide. We've got a couple extra folks now, but we got 1 supervisor, 1 admin dispatcher, 7 senior biomeds, 2 imaging techs, and 5 senior imaging techs, and then 1 imaging associate just started. And we deal mostly with the imaging techs from the security standpoint, for the most part, because that's what they have on the network, and including or excluding, I should say, the infusion pumps that are a big part of it as well. From a healthcare technology management portion of the Biomed department, we've got the director that actually is a director over both sides. The cybersecurity analyst is myself. We now have 1 database analyst still. That's our CMMS analyst or DBA. We have 2 medical device integration engineers, 1 life cycle planner that actually sells our old equipment to third-party companies and to other countries if they need it. So a lot of our old devices get turned over and sold to other facilities. 1 parts procurement specialist, and then a project manager senior. So she's dealing a lot with the incoming projects and equipment and the new buildings that we're building up here in the Waukesha area. Okay, next. Okay, so getting started. So you really, if any of you have ever heard me speak before, the very first part of my conversation when we get into the nitty-gritty of it is what devices are on your network. You need to have a very accurate description and inventory of what's on your network. So medical devices for certain need to be in your CMMS. We actually inventory our lab equipment as well. So typically, you know, CMMS is the computerized maintenance management systems, you know, are for the Biomed and HTM and carry only medical devices. Well, as I just said, we actually include our lab equipment, even though it's not in use in our side. We just have an inventory of them just so we do know what's on the network. So once you figure out what you want to put in your CMMS, what data needs to be collected? You know, what do you really care about? Well, in our system, we've got a lot of different fields that we actually add to an informatics page. But the critical stuff, you know, the MAC address, the IP address, the host name, You want to know what OS it's running, what software versions it's running. If you can get, ideally, if you can get what's the billing of materials, what other softwares are it running? Is it embedded software, or is it just straight off-the-shelf Windows 10? Those kinds of things are very important as you move forward. And if you do happen to come into a security issue, you really want to know what's there and how quickly you can get to the details of that equipment. So what tools are already here? So in most environments, in a hospital environment, IT has their own tools. It's typically, maybe Cisco ISC or Cisco Prime if you're a Cisco house, or they have Nessus scanners and other devices that are watching the network and or give you the capability of scanning a device. So those work well in the IT environment, not necessarily as well in the medical device environment because of the way that we connect with the older software, and typically most medical devices are not on the domain, so they don't have that domain control that most of the IT stuff does, like workstations, phones, servers, things of that nature. Security cameras. So do we need to? I guess then the next question would be then if the IT tools aren't doing what you want them to be doing for your medical devices, do you need to invest in new tools? And yeah, I think from a security standpoint, you really want to be able to let me step back. One thing with those IT tools, a lot of them don't track the network traffic. They know what's on the network, but they don't necessarily know what that device is talking with, or whom it's talking to, or who's talking to it. So that's why we invested in a different tool that actually monitors all the traffic that goes to and from each of the devices, including IT and IomT devices and IoT devices. So there's a multitude of different devices on your network. You really want to be careful and understand what's on the complete network and see what's talking internally and externally. So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions or if I'm coming through clear enough.
Yeah, we can hear you good, Dave. Any questions for Dave? I'll have to repeat them so you won't be able to hear you.
I have a question there.
Okay.
The related inventory, so how you guys do inventory, network price, and then also complex system, for example, one system combine multiple components, how you guys inventory that. Also network device, for example, switch, router, access point, and then the access point controller. So the part of the security issue, it must be you have to countermeasure that one too. So how you guys to put inventory that your database?
Okay. So the first part was how do you inventory the IT type devices? The second part of it, I'll kind of paraphrase there, is how do you inventory the complex systems, say like a cath lab that has multiple PCs that are associated with a single device?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Dave, do we cover that later, or do you want to just take that as a question?
Yeah, I can do it now. I can do parts of it now. So in the IT world, they have their own kind of CMMS. It's called a CMDB. So it's a computer managed database, and that's where all the IT stuff is stored. Most of that is a manual entry. So hopefully, as we all know, manual entries are as good as the person entering the data and how well they keep it up to date. So we don't typically care too much on the medical device world or in the biomed world with what regards to the IT services and IT systems, and that's mostly what they're going to be dealing with their tools and in their own CMDB. As far as I think I understood the second part of the question with regards to the multiple layers of CT equipment. So you've got third-party CT scanning, post-imaging scanning devices. Is that kind of where we're going with that?
Yeah, or like the cath lab where you've got your imaging computer that runs the system, but then inside the device itself, you have multiple PCs that are then connected through a switch and then usually routed out through one IP.
Right. So right now, how we're capturing most of the data is through the core switches. So all traffic you would expect all traffic would be going through the core switch unless it's connected right to the same switch, which could be some east-west traffic difficulties. So there is ways that to kind of track that equipment differently, and you just add an additional sensor that way. But yeah, you do want in your CMMS to try to identify multiple pieces to that puzzle, whether it's a parent-child configuration where you could have the parent as maybe the scanner, and child assets could be then the workstations that they're tied to it, or something of that that kind of nature. But you do need to your point or to the question, you really want to be sure that you capture the whole complete picture. Ideally, there's places in these gathering devices, the CMMSs or the CMDBs, that you can add Visio pictures as well. So that wouldn't be a bad thing to do, especially if you got different people that might be accessing that information. If you added a Visio diagram to say, here's the main scanner and here's the potential PCs that could be affiliated or associated with that particular device.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I think so, Dave. I'm gonna throw my 2 cents in too while we're talking about it. So I think it depends on how the device is configured. So if it's a device with multiple PCs sitting behind a firewall or a router that routes out as a single IP, I would inventory that device as the single IP you're seeing that's going out, track it through that IP. All the data that's going through that IP is also being shared with other devices, so they are protected because you're seeing all the traffic that might be going from, the router coming in and then out. You at least see it all. And then depending on your CMDB, your CMMS system, if it's ServiceNow based, they allow for multiple CI fields. So you could inventory the whole system and then have one tag, and then under that you could have multiple CI fields that cover all the separate IT devices, so you have all that information there.
So that means that there is the one major device, under that the critical subsystem, all the information, for example, for participant version, common version, something like that.
Yeah.
Also, some of there's some really provide DHCP, and the IP is changing it.
Correct. And we'll talk about that later, how to tackle that.
So also the network device concentration monitoring system, they do IP doesn't care. So it belongs to HTN, not IP. The maintain level. So the most vulnerable happen to be for example, port metering, and then for some of the proposal area, maybe very gray area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with monitoring, we used to see a lot of fixed IP addresses on monitoring, and now you're seeing some of the systems, Philips, Vital Signs Monitoring, stuff like that. They're perfectly fine with DHCP. And so that's a whole different ballgame that HTM is used to dealing with, or mostly used to dealing with set IP addresses. Mm-hmm. So it does throw a little curveball into recording that information, but we have some tools that can help with that. Okay. Any other follow-up questions? All right, go ahead, Dave. Next slide.
Yep. So here's a sample page. This is directly out of our CMMS, and this is a truncated portion of our informatics page. This is the one that the device integration specialists and myself have complete access to and complete control over. This is all the details that I was talking about a little bit earlier, how much you want to keep it on your devices. And again, this is just a small portion of what we do keep, but you can kind of see some of the details that we're looking for, software versions and OS upgrade comments. So if it's a if it's a Windows device, there's always an expiration date on service or support from Microsoft. So you kind of want to keep those details in there. And once you add anything, and at least in our particular CMMS, once you add any of those devices in here, they're all searchable and you can filter on any of these particular topic heads and or export the report out. So if you need to kind of get a quick, if somebody asks, okay, where's all your Windows 7 machines, you can do a quick search on the operating system for Windows 7 and get a list out pretty quickly. Again,
and I should point out that they've identified the PHI on the product, and they've identified that it's encrypted at rest. Another one that is really important if you're going through this process is to determine if it's encrypted in transit. And that should all be documented in your system, so that if you ever do have to do an audit on your devices, or if your security people or your risk people come to you and say, hey, give me a list of everything with PHI that's encrypted, that's not, it's as easy as running a report out of here instead of having to go back and just do all the legwork. If you're taking the time to collect the rest of the information, try to get everything you possibly can. Sorry about cutting off there, Dave.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I just want to comment on that. So be diligent about this information. Keep it up to date because, as Ben just mentioned, if somebody wants that information, they're not going to want you to have to go out or send your biomeds or your imaging specialists out there to track that information down. They typically want it within half hour to an hour because there's a need for that. So, yeah, the diligence is really key in that. So we talked about what other tools we can do. So is an IomT discovery tool necessary? How do you determine that? If it's right for your organization or not? I guess that's a lot on your discussions with your IT department, your biomeds to determine what you can trace and track. If there is a place in there that you might have some vulnerability or some I'll just call black holes or some hidden equipment, then maybe you do need a discovery tool that's sitting on your network that's watching all traffic. If you're it depends on the size of your company too. I mean, there's multiple multiple reasons to do or not do, and I think in today's society, unfortunately, with the security vulnerabilities that are out there now and the bad actors that are out there now, I think most organizations are diligent in their thought process to make sure that everything is protected or at least identified. And especially with PHI and the fines that the federal governments can throw out for HIPAA violations or PHI loss, the costs certainly outweigh potentials of a breach or of a loss of data for one of these discovery tools. So it's kind of my soapbox there. But so what's the process to identify the tool that meets your needs? If you've decided, okay, IT and Biomed and upper management say, okay, yeah, let's go find a tool. First thing I'm going to tell you is research. You need to create a list of questions of what you're looking for, what you want to address, what gaps you may have, whether it's in your IT tools or just in general. How robust is your CMMS? If you want to feed back to your CMMS some of this information that this tool discovers, then you've got an opportunity to do that, post installation. But you need to research and literally list as many questions as you can think of, and then talk to the organizations out there. You can look at CLAS. CLAS has got a great list of KLAS. They've got a great list of these tools and what customers like myself and other customers of these tools have, what our responses have been, and what our pluses and minuses have been for each of the companies that we've talked to or deal with. So that's a good resource as well. ECRI is a good resource as well. So there's places out there you can kind of look for this detail, but once you've determined what you want to bridge, what gaps you want to bridge, then ask these companies for remote demonstrations. And a remote demonstration probably takes an hour and a half tops. You do it from from the conference room at your own facility. So I would do as many as you're comfortable with doing. And once you start doing these, this is going to sound negative, but they're all kind of doing the same thing. But it's just how one fits better to your organization, how it displays stuff, how it reacts to your conversation. That's the kind of things that in buying anything, that's what you're looking for, is a good camaraderie and the good communication between the two. So once you have that demonstration, you have a good idea on who you may want to do a proof of concept with. So that's the next step, is once you do your research and figure out what you want, then you do these product demos. Once you've done the demos, then you do a concept. And I suggest a minimum of 2 or 3. If you were comfortable, that's again, it's going to be a coordinated effort between Biomed and IT, because IT needs to give them access to some of the switches to get the details. Most likely what happens in this proof of concept, the company that you're dealing with will send you a piece of hardware to the network and start filtering the data in. So again, this is a distinct relationship with your IT department, as they will need to give them the access. In our instance, we did a POC 3 companies, and we fed to the companies the exact same data, meaning we tapped off of the core switch the exact same VLANs. I don't know how you guys, it depends on how your network is segmented or divvied up, I guess. For imaging, we have an imaging VLAN, so we looked through and figured out what VLANs we wanted to send them, and we sent all 3 of the companies the exact same data. So we had a good apples to apples comparison between the companies. So then, what's the key problems? Actually, let me pause right there and see if there's any quick questions on that.
Questions?
Yeah. Actually, I'd love to give this class. Actually, a lot of medical device isolated each other by the VLAN, different VLAN. So each VLAN cannot communicate each other without allowing. So they need how to discovery all the connected medical device and the visibility achievable.
So when they set the span, sorry, demonstrates, when they set the span up to send the data out, you select the VLANs you want to be on that span port. So they duplicate the data for those VLANs so that it's not that they have to go through the router. The data is just coming through the span port from all the different VLANs.
Eventually, all data go to different direction. For example, a fax server go to different direction. Also, patient data go to another. For example, the create patient management system go to IDE, and IDE the middleware between the EHR system and our data. So all data exit area for different how to monitor all of the device visibility one spot. So that's the very much a question for me. Very much hard to monitor every single device, and then also the behavior of the traffic, and then also a lot of different platforms how to put it all together to see monitoring
all the data you're collecting. Yeah, that's a problem everybody's dealing with. So to get all the data in from the right place, you have to work with your network architects, and they can find a place in the network where they can pull a span, and it might require multiple pieces of hardware. So if you can't get it all through one span part, but physically separated by a VPN or something like that, and not all the traffic's coming back to a central location, then you put a piece of hardware at that location and put a span port to it there, and then you aggregate all that data back into the system.
So basically, NITS, right? Network, the intrusion protection system like that. One is a serial line to all data go to one spot, and kind of gateway to
monitor. It's kind of a virtual one line by bringing all the data together to a span port.
So another thing is the IomT. Everybody very much confusing IomT, IoT, and OT. So some people say the connected device called IoT. Some people say IomT, and then some people say OT. So very much make that confusing.
Okay.
Can you clarify?
How I would IoT and IomT really don't matter to me. They're both IoT. The MT just means hey, it's a medical device. I would treat them the same way from a security standpoint. OT is more of a manufacturing term, or like plant facilities. That's kind of where I would make that differentiator.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, David. Do you want the next slide, or we good?
No, hang on. We'll stay here for. So next thing that you really want to talk about is what key problems should every IomT or IoT or discovery tool solve, and realistically, they should be identifying devices on your network. So this is kind of all right. You're in the POC environment, and what are you looking to get out of that? So you're looking to get out of device, everything that every device that's on your network, again associated to those VLANs that you're connecting with. And where are they? Where are they at? Who are they talking with internally and externally? Devices that are vulnerable based on their makeup, OS or open ports, for example. So you're looking for all these different details, and all these discovery tools should be able to give you those details. And then briefly say what the implementation would look like. So once you've decided on an application tool, what's next? So again, with IT's help, decide what facilities you're interested in gathering information at. Is it all of your facilities, or is it just specific places, maybe just imaging sites? how are you going to attach it to the network? There's a couple of configurations that all of the tools, the discovery tool manufacturers have. So you just got to figure out what's based on your IT infrastructure, what's best for your networking. Okay, next.
All right, and I just add real quick to that, Dave, and you probably will disagree with this on that one, but Dave's journey to picking a product was easier than what you have it today, because when Dave did 3 POVs, there was 3 solutions available. Right now, you will find at least 6 solutions at this show. There's about 10 in the marketplace. I caution you against doing POVs on a significant amount of them. Use your tools, identify them, do conference calls, demos, narrow it down to 3. After 3, your networking team, your IT teams are going to be fed up and they're not going to have anything to do with the whole process. So narrow it down using the tools you have, and then we go into POV 3 or less at that point in time.
That's a very good point. Thanks for the ad. Okay, so now what? We've got our tool. You know, again, we're still at, is it necessary? So here's, once you've got the implementation done and now you're starting to get data back, you know, you're going to get a lot of data, because if you haven't been a discovered network for a while, there's going to be some things out there. So once you start discovering these things, you know, you're going to get overwhelmed, and you need to step back and say, okay, I should have expected this. If I didn't, this is what I'm getting, all these details. Where do we prioritize our next steps? So, you know, what you can do, first thing is you can upgrade what you can. You know, look through your device and see what's old. You know, you should have already that information from your CMMS, so you should already understand from your CMMS what's your old Windows XP version still out there, or Windows 7 that's already expired. But if this tool will, you know, definitely give you the details and identify specifically what Windows 7s are and what versions of that. You know, protect what you can't upgrade. So we protect things that we can't upgrade using segmentation. I'll go a little bit more into that in the next slide. But a segmentation on a network is a real good tool, or a real good, yeah, I guess a tool for the IT department to use for segmented VLANs. VLANs themselves are some sort of a higher level segmentation, but when we talk into the micro segmentation, which we talk in the next slide, I'll explain a little bit deeper. To recommend replacement on the highest risk devices, you know, it's the same thing. So we're going to look at, you know, what's your highest risk devices? Is it your infusion pumps? You know, because they're touching patients all the time. Is it your CT scanners? Because they're exposing radiation to your customers or to your patients. So it depends on what, you know, as a collective in your organization, what you want to deem as your next attack measure. You know, where you're going to start, you know, upgrade what you can, protect what you can't, and then you know, what you replace, what, you know, look for replacements, because some of these are high dollar value. So you know, you're not just going to go out and say, okay, we got to replace the MRI because it's a, you know, older machine. So you know, at a cost of 1.2 mil or whatever the case may be, you know, it's not something that most organizations will just say, okay, sure, let's go for it. See, I'm just looking at some notes here. Vendor send us. So what we're looking to try to do is we regulate new devices. We are adding language in our contracting process as we speak to have the vendors send us their risk vulnerability assessment data. So hopefully all the vendors are doing their own risk assessments on their equipment before they're sending it out into the marketplace. And we want that data. We want to know what the results of that was, and also we want to know what the scanning process was. What's the configuration of their process. We want their current MDS2 forms. And we also want SBOMs if they're available. SBOMs is software bill of materials. So again, that's the other thing that they're already using off-the-shelf SQL, or are they using off-the-shelf Adobe for whatever reason, things like that. So you just, again, the more details you can have about your devices, if, and knock on wood, it never happens to any of us in this room or in your room, that, you know, you get breached or you get an attack by somebody. If you have to get that detail, you want to get that detail as fast as possible. So looking over these documents will assist in onboarding to determine if they need to be segmented from the start. So that's kind of the big key of that. So next slide. So this is the IoT segmentation that I was talking about. It's a very, very busy screen, a slide. I apologize for that. So I won't go every aspect of it. But the key elements to this basically are a discovery tool that we've been talking about should be able to give you specific details on what a group of devices talk with internally and externally. So let's just take a CT scanner or a group of CT scanners. So you've got the same GE, I'm just throwing GE out there, whatever manufacturer CT scanners that you have out there, they all are going to talk in the same fashion. And the reason I pick on one manufacturer, not particularly GE, but anybody, Philips, Siemens, whatever it is, they all have their own phone home or their own remote access. So those are going to be a little bit distinct to the manufacturer. You know, a CT scanner from one company is not going to talk to the same phone home as a CT scanner from another one. So what we found in our environment is we're looking at a specific model, or not necessarily a model, a device type, so CT scanner or an MRI scanner, and the other state to that is the same manufacturer, because that's going to have the same external communications that you know, the other vendors are not going to have. So once you've determined what you want to do on that, then you go back and you say, okay, from this, within the tool, again, you can create an ACL, which is an access control list, or I sometimes call it a whitelist. That could be inserted into your policy enforcing application, which in our case, we use Cisco ICE. And this will allow or deny a device on what it talks with. So specifically, once you find out what the network flow genomes are, or whatever the network talking is for out of the tool, you create that list, and then you apply it into your ICE program or your NAC. And then what happens then is once that device authenticates again to the network, it gets this policy attached to it, and it limits on what it can talk to. It can only talk to a PAC server and maybe a post-processing PC, and then phone home. And then anyone else tries to talk to it, it gets blocked. So it's very good in segmentation if you can't get the software up to the latest levels and keep it patched. We didn't talk about patching, but can't keep it patched, and that's really what you want to look to do. I'll pause there, and I think that's kind of all I have. If there's any other questions, I know this is a really busy slide. I could go in this slide for about 30 minutes itself, but I know we don't have that much time.
Okay, thank you, David. So just a question for the room. Are you using NAC solutions to protect their medical devices in real life? How's it going? Going through. One of my engineers always jokes that NAC doesn't stand for network access control, it stands for never actually complete. So it's a big process that you have to follow to do this. And having been down this journey and trying to tackle it, if you try to tackle it one device at a time, it really is never complete. You're just burning hours and hours and hours. So being able to take those devices and group them like devices that communicate the same pattern, and you could even start with your medical imaging equipment. Everything that talks to your PAC servers or reaches out to your overnight radiology service through a VPN, they all, for the most part, outside of a couple of communication patterns, do the same thing. So start big and then work small will help you to maximize your efforts to get to that location. Any questions for Dave? He's going to stay with us. He'll add some color as we go along. Cool. All right, not any questions, Dave. We're going to go on.
All right.
I'm going to run through this fairly quick. I don't want to keep you from lunch, and if I ran through it at normal pace, we would be here probably for an extra 15 minutes. So the one thing outside, well, let me start with this. Outside working for Ordr, I spent 18 years working for SSM Health. It's a 24-bed HDO out of the Midwest. Started 2000 something as a BMed one, and ended up being the director of project management. And one of my hats for that was to start a cybersecurity program. And this is some of the lessons learned through that process, some of the lessons I've learned working with customers of Ordr over the last year, and things just coming to these events that I've talked to people about. So one of the biggest barriers to a good cybersecurity program is communication. IT, HTM, network services, security are all generally very siloed within organizations. They don't play well together. This can be for many different reasons. It can be a leadership problem. Leaders don't like each other. They're very adversarial. It could be the reporting structure. HTM doesn't really have a good reporting structure. Sometimes it'll report to facilities. Sometimes it reports to plan ops. Sometimes it reports to IT. Sometimes it reports to some department that makes 0 sense why it reports to it. But it's just the way it's always been. So my best practice is if you can have HTM and IT report at the same leader at some point in time in the structure. There has to be that communication path. There has to be one person that can go figure it out and be over both of those groups. If they can't, and you can't work that out in your organization, it's just too big, it won't work. Those leaders that are at the higher parts of both the organization's IT and HCM need to have an open communication path. They need to be on the same page. Otherwise, everybody underneath them won't be on the same page either. And of those groups, you need to identify the key people in those groups that are going to be working specifically on medical device cybersecurity. And they need to be in a room together, on a phone together, regularly. Be that once a month, quarterly. I wouldn't go longer than quarterly, probably to get away with 6 months. But they need to have an open line of communication. They need to know who each other are and who to go to when they have problems. And then you need to create with that team policies and procedures for them to follow. So when something happens, you're not inventing it on the fly. When you have an adverse event, minutes matter. And if they're on the phone trying to call someone from HTM or calling someone from HTM to figure out who the right person to talk to is about this device, you're losing valuable time. Any questions on that with leadership and so forth? Kind of think about it, it makes sense, but it's really a hard thing to pull off. So Dave talked about this a little bit, but that was his organization. Your organization's going to be a little different. But knowing what you already have, and this isn't, equipment, this is know the people you already have, know the skill sets that they have, know, which HTM team members have IT experience. You're going to find it very hard to find HTM members with security experience. There's very few of them in the world, but if they have IT experience, they can usually learn the security side relatively quickly. See if there's something on the security side that has some medical device experience, and it doesn't have to be with HTM. They could have been an anesthesia tech. It doesn't matter. They just have to kind of have an understanding of medical devices and why it's important and why you can't just flip a switch and kick it off the network and go on with your day and say you did a good job. And then, if you don't have those resources, are you going to hire them, or are you going to see if there's a service that can provide them for you? And is that service going to be, just a one-time deal, or is it going to be a contract service over an extended period of time? So this goes into that. Do you need more FTEs? We always need more FTEs, but can you justify why you need more FTEs? Can you put down on paper and operationalize why cybersecurity is important? And there's some key things that kind of go across the whole thing, but this is going to be very pointed towards your organization, the size of your organization, and how you can leverage economy of scales to justify that person or the people that you need for your program. Dave talked about this. Do you get more accurate inventory? The answer is yes. You can never have an inventory that is 100% perfect. We do our best. HTM is really good at identifying the assets, serial number, the model, and all that stuff. But we missed all that IT information for many years, and it's a process to go back and get it. I mean, you start with the stuff that's coming in, and you can patch that one hole in the ship, but you already got water all in it. You get that out. So you need to figure out a way to get your inventory up to speed and accurate. And then we'll go back to that resources. Can we do this with the team we have? Do we have the people to get this up to speed, or are we going to have to ask for help? So this framework, it's pretty common. I think hopefully everybody's seen this at some point in time. We're going to talk about identify, protect, detect, and respond. Recover and analyze your kind of, well, at that point anyway, there's not much we can really talk about that. It's going to be, it's going to be what you have to do to get through the event. So identify. So this is identifying the stuff that you have on the network and your assets. And these are the three major ways that I found people have done it. And they all have pros and cons as they're listed up here. A one-time effect is you go out to somebody and you say, we need this inventory. And it looks different depending on the company you go to. There are, I would say, probably 10 companies out there that are pretty good at this. They all have a little different strategy and path to get there. Some of them will bring a team of HTM professionals in, and they'll walk piece to piece to piece and pick all this information out and then put it in a spreadsheet or put it into your database for you and then walk away. Some of them will come in and put an appliance on the network, monitor the traffic, try to get as much as they can, and then piecemeal it in with using people that go out to the sites. One thing about this is it is overall relatively inexpensive. It's a big one-time expense, but it's not a recurring expense. It's over and done with. The problem with it is it's inaccurate the next day. As soon as they're done collecting the data, if you're dealing with DHCP or if you're dealing with a manufacturer coming in to upgrade the software and you don't document it properly, that information is only good as the point in time it's gathered. And it can be intrusive. You have people coming in, your CT department, and taking the technician off the device to gather the information. They're very good at this, they're very courteous, but it's still an intrusion into your patient care. The one is Dave's ProHealth chose, is an automated discovery tool. Dave said it, I'll admit it, we all do start with about the same thing. We start with data coming off your network. What we do with it after that is where the products start to differ, and then what we do even after we gathered it to help you protect devices, that's where the big difference is with the products. So these things are relatively quick. You get in, you get the clients on the network. Most of them within 24 hours, you're going to see everything on the network. If you haven't identified everything within a week, within about 95% accuracy, you're probably looking at the wrong product. We all do that fairly well. The good things about this is you get real-time updates, so your data is accurate, up to date. If you're looking at DHCP devices, you connect this to your CMMS. When you log in your CMMS, you're going to know the IP address of that device at that point in time, not what it was when they gathered it or pinged it last time or anything like that. These also can help in the next phases to protect. So they also not only identify the device, but they identify how it communicates and the patterns it uses, so we can do that segmentation that Dave was talking about. And these pick up new devices, things that slip through the cracks, vendors that bring in, demo equipment that already had a way to get on the network with the previous piece of equipment, and just go ahead and throw it on the network anyway, or even ones that are coming in using the guest network. Butterfly ultrasounds are notorious for that. So that can help you find those medical devices that you didn't know got on the network. Cons on this, it can be expensive. It's a process. You need your resources. There's sometimes a hardware expense that's associated with it, and then it's an ongoing expense. So it's a license fee yearly, or you pay up front for a few years, but it's not a once and done deal. You got to keep paying for it. And then they require some maintenance. It's a good idea to have somebody that's over the system that can keep track of it and keep it in order, and make sure that the people that are responsible for the assets are actually taking action if they see adverse events happening. And then internal resources. This one's tough. The good thing is that you're using what you already have, so there's not much expense associated with it. You can try to do it during your PM cycles. Just say, hey, while you're there, collect this additional data. So technicians fail to do that. So then if you're on a 6-month PM cycle, you're 6 months, a year out. If you're on a year cycle, it's the next year before you get to it, unless you make an extra trip. That's some of the same cons as the first one. It's inaccurate as soon as the technician does it. It can be intrusive unless they're doing it on a PM cycle. It takes away from the daily tasks of the technicians that are already tasked with a whole bunch more than they probably have the bandwidth to deal with. And it takes a significant time to complete if you're doing this over time. So any questions about any of those three? So protect. This goes back to when we were talking about the breaking down those barriers with the different departments, is you have to have policies to protect. You need to have outlines of the responsibilities of what IT is responsible for, what HTM is responsible for, what the network is responsible for. And then you need to try to think ahead the best you can of what the most common situations are. We're living in the world of ransomware in healthcare right now. You should have a policy around ransomware written and understood by everyone that needs to do something with an adversity like that. Your policy should include those things that Dave mentioned, the upgrade path for devices, what you do if you can't upgrade the device, how you're going to protect it, and then your process to go through the capital process to get that replaced. When we went down this journey with Windows 7, we got into Windows 7. IT walked in with a list of devices they found on the network for Windows 7, and they said, you got to replace these. And I walked in with a $64 million list of equipment. I said, give me some money. And at that point in time, they said, we're going to have to find another solution. I'm like, thank you. But there does need to be a path to get those out of this situation and bring in devices that are security forward, that security was designed with the product from the beginning. So reward those manufacturers that are doing that. And the ones that aren't, don't buy their equipment. They'll start sooner or later if you're not buying their stuff. An encryption strategy is very important. That's that whole know that if it's encrypted at rest, it's encrypted in transit. If it's not encrypted directly from the manufacturer, if they have any third-party encryption software that they have approved, but they don't ship with it, that you can put on there. but you need to know that, and it needs to be documented, because if it's encrypted and it's not documented, it doesn't matter. If you can't prove it was encrypted and something happens, you still have issues. And then backup and restore procedures are another one I think we miss sometimes. There should be multiple backups for each device. Your CTs, there should be an on-site backup. There should be not necessarily off-site, but out of the department backup for that. With ransomware on medical devices, especially in the environment where the people that are perpetrating this stuff, they're not as skilled as they used to be, which is unfortunate. A lot of the times you can pay the ransom, which I don't advocate or disadvocate either of those things, but they give you the tools that are supposed to fix it, and the tools don't work. So you're stuck either way. You're taking that machine down, you're re-imaging it to the factory, bringing it back up with a backup. Most of the time, that's going to be your quickest way to get back up and running on medical devices. Just wipe them out, start from scratch, and bring them back up. Segmentation, Dave talked about segmentation. You know, can you use, if you do have a NAC, do you have Cisco ICE, do you have another NAC product that you can use to protect the devices? What firewalls do you have in your system? Firewalls typically aren't good for the east-west traffic, but they can protect some north-south stuff, and they are getting better with east-west. The VLANs, we all use VLANs generally with medical device VLANs, and that VLANs offer some protection, but it's not the best solution. You really need to get to that network access control to really call it isolated. And then physical security is part of cybersecurity. All medical devices have USB ports on them for the most part now. Some of them are behind a panel, some of them are exposed. Any USB port on a device is a phone charger to a patient. And you don't know where that phone's been, you don't know if there's a way for that phone to get data off that onto the device that it's plugged into. So physically restricting access to USB ports, although time consuming, is a very good practice. It also keeps your vendors from coming in, installing firmware off the same flash drive that they use at every other customer, and they've had for 5 years, and Lord knows what's on it. They have to come to you first before they can do that. Isolate vulnerable devices. Your portable stuff that contains PHI should not be sitting in a hallway that general patient access. It should be secured in a room. If it's a portable device like a laptop, if it has to be moved around, it should be secured to the cart. So it can't just be picked up and walked out of the room. If you can secure the cart to a wall in reasonable distance, it should be secured that way. That's where you have to physically restrain portable devices. Before this last 12 to 18 months, I'd say most likely your PHI exposure event is going to be for something stupid, like a laptop walking out of the building or something like that. It's gotten a lot more towards the ransomware type stuff right now, but it's still the most likelihood of you sitting across the table from an OCR inspector is because a device just walked out the door. Not somebody came in and did some elaborate hack and pulled the data down. No, it just walked out. Any questions on protect? Okay, detect. So this one should go pretty quick. Definitely do not want to keep everybody over, but I am more than happy to stay here as long as you are. It kicks out. Understand the typical device behavior. So this is those tools that we've been talking about, is monitor what the device is doing and have a way to alert if this device is acted this way for 12 months and it goes outside of the norm, a way to say, hey, we need to look at this. And outside the norm could be malicious. Your tool should identify whether the communication was malicious or not, or if it's just different. And it should alert differently based on the severity of the event. Work with IT and security to understand what you already have. IT does have some tools that see these types of communication patterns. They know when devices are reaching out to bad URLs. They have firewall policies in place that can block things. So if you're not to the point where you can really look at a specific tool for medical devices, look at what you have, work with IT, get them to explain what it does to you and see if it works for your environment. It could save you a bunch of time and money. We're back to communication, and I'm beating it through that horse, but you have to have those communication plans documented ahead of time, because it's too late if something's happening and you're trying to figure out who to talk to and how to get a hold of them and so forth. This is a person. Be part of the solution. When IT comes to you and says we have a problem, don't just blow them off. Whether you think it's a problem or not, investigate it with them. Work through the solution, come to an amicable decision that they believe now this isn't a problem. But once they know that you're invested in security, they're more than likely to go to help you when you come to them and say, hey, I've got a problem, I need your help. Build a relationship with your IT team. That's what I just said. It's, you know, they should know your name. You know, the ones that are the key players, you should know who they are. You should be comfortable in the event where you need to call them and not put a ticket in. They need to understand that it's an emergency. It's not, you're just being lazy and you don't want to put a ticket in the back to you. And then time, your biggest enemy when these type of events happen, being able to react quickly and take action on what you see going on and stop an adverse event as quickly as possible is going to save you a lot of time. So that's great. How are I going to pay for it? So this is probably the first time I'll ever say this, but your government's helped you a little bit in this area here. So we're all familiar with the HITECH Act. It brought us the wonderful world of electronic health records and reimbursement for implementing electronic health records. It also did some other things. It outlined violations to use the data that you're now responsible for collecting. And it set up some penalties for violations, but it was very vague. Why? You really didn't know what you're getting into. If you were going into an investigation, there was no great documentation on what to expect or you know what penalty could be. And as they levied penalties, they varied greatly for same types of events. There was no real standards. January 5th of this year, they passed an amendment to that. And this is something, it's Public Law 116-321. And it outlines what you can do to help mitigate those penalties if an adverse event did occur. It basically said that if you have put in place recognized security practices for a period of 12 months, that will be taken into account when the investigation is going on. This could be significant financial benefit to your organization in the fact that the longer an investigation goes on, it's you're paying lawyers, you're paying specialists, you're doing all these things. And if you have these processes in place and you can prove it, you're going to reduce that time that investigation is occurring, possibly reduce penalties that are going to be assessed against your organization. So it's not an immediate return on investment, but something's going to happen. In this day and age, you cannot get around this. Be it a piece of device that gets sent off for recycling and not the hard drive's not clear. I mean, it's as simple as that, or it's that ransomware attack that we all lose sleep over. But if you prepare and you do the things that are outlined, you know, so the NIST framework is a recognized security practice. AMI has documentations that basically follow the NIST framework fairly well. But you've got to start now because if you haven't started, you're already 12 months behind. Any questions on this? I kind of just glance at, you know, when you have 5 minutes to kill and you want to fall asleep. So some takeaways, break down communication barriers, identify those key individuals and what they're responsible for, analyze what you have before you start going off to spend money, and determine if you need more and put together a cogent response to ask for those. Don't just say, I need, you know, look what's going on in the world, I need security people. You need to have data to back it up and a plan that fits your organization's needs before you start asking for things. Leverage economies of scale. If you're a small rural hospital, this one's very difficult. But if you have 5, 6 hospitals and you want a security person, you have 5 or 6 hospitals with people that are researching all the same patches and all the same security defects and stuff. If you can put that to one person and take those biomeds that are doing that repetitive work that someone else is also doing and use one person to do it and spread the information out, you can actually get a lot more done and give your biomed time back in the day to do what they're supposed to be doing, their PMs and repairs. And if you can do this, your biomeds get on board a lot quicker too. If they stop having to go out and research patches and do that kind of work. I mean, maybe we went as far as we would take the security person would work with one person to install the patch, make sure everything went well before pushing it out. That way, if there were any kind of hiccups, it would have documentation say, okay, well, you can get this, you can do this, this, and this. And it was very well received by the biomed department for taking those kind of repetitive processes away from them on a daily basis. And then develop a plan that meets your organization's needs. It's not all going to be the same. There's some commonalities, but based on your size, your network infrastructure, how you've done stuff, all the plans are going to be different, but they have to be suited to your organization. I'll wait on that one. Dave, I talked a lot here. Anything to add on any of those? Or
No, you did good. Thank you.
okay. Any questions overall? Ray's just hungry and wants to get some lunch. All right, so this is my last 30 seconds of our sales pitch. So Ordr is one of those tools that can do this. We see what's on there, we see all the connected devices. We know the risks of those devices, be it either pulling in vulnerability data that's already out there, or looking at the traffic and assigning risk scores to it based on any kind of risky behavior it's doing with the traffic, and then securing it, working with the tools that you have, the NAC tools, the firewalls, and being able to take that data you collected and push it out to those devices so you can create the most secure policy around that device and not impacting patient care at the same time. That's the trademark place. We have Mayo Clinic's one of our bigger customers. We've learned a lot from them, driven the product into the way. And then ProHealth has also helped us immensely